Now, our next guest speaker is Executive Technical Advisor at VMware, helping us understand the difference between cloud and cloud native. Please join me in welcoming Bernard Golden to the show. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you. From cloud to cloud native, I work at VMware. I work in our modern advanced applications platform group. And so we really work on helping organizations, and these are VMware's largest customers, move to digital transformation, cloud migration, moving to cloud, native capabilities. And so I'm going to talk about that today. And let me start off by making a pretty obvious observation. Cloud computing is booming. And I think the industry is a little jaded about this, but this is AWS quarterly results. And really, AWS is representative of Microsoft, Google. I call them AMG for Amazon, Microsoft, Google. The size of their markets and the growth is amazing. It's like unprecedented, really, across the technology industry and maybe across human industry or human experience. AWS right now is about a $80 billion run rate per year, growing at 33%, which is quite astonishing. And so that means by the end of this year, or maybe the end of next year, it'll probably be a $110 billion business, again, growing that quickly. So clearly there's huge demand for cloud computing. Organizations are adopting it right, left, center, up, down, whatever. So, but what I often hear, what I often observe, what I often hear across the industry is people say, I've gone to cloud, but where's the magic? I'm supposed to go to cloud and get all this incredible stuff happening. I want to be like a company like Airbnb or Lyft or Netflix, but it's taken me forever to migrate my applications. By the way, it's no easier to update them now than it was when I started. In the old data center. Why is that? My applications aren't any more resilient. I thought things were supposed to be more uptime, more available in cloud, and really I'm getting no better than I did when I was running my own infrastructure. Why is that? And we've already heard about cost 2 or 3 times here. Cloud is even more expensive than what I had before, so I'm not happy about that. And really, it's all kind of sums up as it's the application lifecycle is the same old speed, and really that's the key thing. Things aren't moving any more quickly. And why is that? Well, I like to, when I have these kind of discussions, I like to quote a phrase from Warren Buffett. He says, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. And in his case, that typically means a company has taken on too much debt, and in good times, they can cover the debt service. But when times get tough, there's a recession or something like that, or challenges within their industry, all of a sudden they get caught short, they have a liquidity crisis, and then bankruptcy. And only when the tide goes out do you discover which companies have been adopting too much risk and which haven't. And why is this relevant to what I've just outlined? Well, it used to be infrastructure within companies would take anywhere from 3 to 18 months to get into place, depending on the vagaries of the organization, budgetary cycles, and so forth. So if it takes that long to get core infrastructure, servers, network connectivity set up, well, if your application lifecycle, if your practices aren't very efficient, it doesn't really make that much difference. But once infrastructure is available as it is in cloud computing, like you can get a server up and running in 10 minutes, all of a sudden you see all the inefficiencies in the way you've been doing computing. And that's what happens. You discover who's been swimming naked within this is extending the metaphor a bit too far, but you really get the inefficiencies in your application lifecycle, which has knock-on effects of they don't get any more resilient if they're moved in the cloud. They're still inefficient in terms of the way they operate. And so you've got to change from old styles of computing, of application approaches, to new styles to really take advantage of cloud and become cloud native. And that's what I want to talk about. So the important thing to understand is this is a new world. You're running a software factory. And just like this is a picture of a Ford, as you can see, there's a lot of robots here. But if we extended further down the line, you'd see lots of humans. They've got the entire production process streamlined to operate so that cars get manufactured as quickly as possible, that there's no bottlenecks, and that once one thing occurs and is finished, one step in the construction is done, it hands off automatically to the next. And really, the metaphor is very applicable for cloud native. The best cloud native companies, I mentioned Netflix, Lyft, whoever you want to choose, they view themselves as running a software factory, and they optimize the software process just like Ford optimizes the auto manufacturing process. So what does it take to do that? Well, your action plan. So one, conduct a value stream mapping. Value stream mapping is common across processes across many domains, but it's basically sitting down and analyzing a process and then understanding what are all the steps in that process and how much time does it take to get through those things. And you can do this for anything like drilling an oil well or whatever, but in this case, it is the application lifecycle. And you sort of say, from the point where a developer begins working on code to the point where that code is actually up and running in production, what are all the steps that it takes? Who are all the people that need to touch it? What are all the tools that are applied to it? And you identify this. And this is a kind of a high level scrubbed value stream mapping done for an organization. And you can see that some things don't take very long and some things take a lot of time. So for example, the first couple of stages, a few minutes to an hour, then 5 minutes, that's not so bad. And then the next thing is 1 hour to 2 days. All of a sudden, that's a big chunk of time. And there's some things that go quite quickly and some things that don't run very, that take a long time. And the point of this value stream mapping is you then say, what are the places we need to really focus on to start streamlining this? And let's attack those as a priority to figure out a way to speed them up. So the value stream mapping provides a kind of a roadmap to where you should be paying attention to speed up your overall application lifecycle. This is commonly a first step. This is one we do with organizations. And what I'll say is this can be quite illuminating for companies because they often don't even realize all the different steps in getting an application, because typically they're done in a silo manner. And somebody says, well, I did my job, I head it off to the next person. I don't know what they do and whatever. And so you can end up with lots of steps in this process that most of the participants weren't aware of. And then I start to identify what are all the things that need to be addressed. So the first thing, conduct a value stream mapping. The next thing, build applications so they can take advantage of the capabilities of cloud computing. And so one of the key challenges, I talked about resilience and speed, is application architecture, which microservices versus monolith. Most companies traditionally have worked on monoliths where all of the code in an application sits in one big executable. And that's not a best practice for cloud computing. It makes it difficult to be resilient. It tends to run up costs because if there's some part of that application that needs lots of processing and parts that don't, you still have to deploy the entire thing within every instance, within every virtual server to get that functionality. And so you're running a lot of servers that aren't operating those lesser used functions just to get the more highly used ones. With a microservice, you can decompose that. You can start running lots of little instances of the highly used services and a few of the lesser used services and get better tuning of the usage versus the value, which affects your cost. Use pre-selected and approved tools and services. So that means what are all the things that people should use to build these applications, these microservice applications? Identify those, make them available, and put those in place so that people can easily access them, but also don't allow, make it difficult for organizations to use, or developers, application groups, to use services that you don't want them to use, because that imposes complexity, which affects operational practices, operational efficiency, and cost. Deliver software, not diagrams. Many of us have seen very impressive enterprise architecture or application architecture diagrams, and the problem is you never really know how that's going to work in practice. And so the thing to do is really deliver software and then iterate against that. So rapid releases that you can frequently update to improve, and that's a way to go about that. API enable all the things. The best practice is to make these things available, callable by APIs, rather than binding them tightly or putting them into the same executable. And that enables you to reach out to external services to sort of construct applications like Legos can be clicked together. So that's a way to do that. Design for change. I can't emphasize this enough. Applications change over their lifetime. And the traditional problem with most application life cycles, and the reason change happens so slowly, is it's designed for as though it's going to change infrequently or never change. And then you want to put changes into it. It's very difficult to figure out, well, where does that functionality live? Um, how can we get at that when we have other stuff going on within the instance? How do we coordinate all of the work? Well, expect that you're going to be changing it. And so architect it so that you can allow groups to work on their piece parts separately, which again goes back to the microservices. Let me point out the illustration on the right. This is actually an illustration taken from the well-architected framework that AWS publishes. And you heard Steph mention that in terms of the labs they make available. And really, this is a set of practices around how do you design and operate cloud-native applications. I think it's an excellent resource. I would definitely recommend it. So the key metric is, as you move forward with this, how many of your applications are cloud-native and how many are remaining as monoliths. You can run monoliths in the cloud. They just don't run that efficiently, which raises costs. They tend to be very static and difficult to change, so that they have poor resilience. So the key metric is, what kind of progress are you making? How many of your applications are cloud native versus monolith? Okay, remove developer toil. This illustration on the right is from the Greek myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was doomed, or was given the task for eternity of rolling a giant boulder up a hillside, getting to the very top, and then it slips from his grasp and falls all the way to the bottom. He has to go back and push it back up the hill. And as you might imagine, that is kind of symbolic of just never-ending work that is really difficult. And that's a challenge that you applied to this process. You want to remove developer toil. Make it easier for developers to do their work. Make it so they are not doing this kind of repetitive, difficult, lengthy work. Make it easy for them to get going. So automate resource access. Make these things available from a service catalog. I discussed those kind of predefined services. We'll make them available and make it automated so they can get access to them. So they don't have to set them up themselves. They can just click and pick and begin using them. And predefined resource types. So this might be something like, I need a database. Well, have it available so that they don't have to go into the console and select it and configure it, choose what size to use. It's already predefined. If you want to use a database, click on this thing and it's the organization approved size. And you can put that into the pipeline and very easily get it through without any needing to check and get approval from anyone, and so forth. Accelerators or templates to reduce setup time. These tend to be predefined code templates that a developer can just import into their IDE, and they've already got the organizational construct for how applications should be set up, what kinds of services need to be in the code, what kinds of configurations need to be set for the application, and that reduces their setup time. So they can begin coding on the application more quickly without needing to do lengthy, I need to install a container, I need to bring in these code modules, I need to integrate them, I need to configure them to operate properly. Resumes a lot of toil, but it also has benefits for security and compliance. So if you make those available as something they can import, it's already pre-configured to the organizational standards. It's already got the security settings that are appropriate that the compliance risk management group needs. Reduces their toil and makes it simpler to pass those security things, which means that your value stream mapping is likely to reduce the time spent in those steps. Then the key metric really is speed to first check-in on the new project. How quickly can a developer be assigned to a new project and be up and checking in code on that project, the application code? And you can track this, and the shorter that duration, the more efficient your developers are. Probably the happier they are, because developers, like anyone else, they don't enjoy doing Sisyphean work. All right.
Perfect. Awesome. Bernard, thank you so much for that. I know you have a lot more. We'd like to provide you the slides after this session. Yep. Plus, it will be recorded. Bernard's got a lot of great information. A couple of questions from the audience. What are the
Yeah.
most common reasons companies fall short of their cloud ambitions?
Well, I would say that the most common reason I find is that people underestimate and they fail to plan. And this really echoes David's earlier point, which is um, this is a whole new environment. And just like you wouldn't move to a new city without really finding out where are the schools, where are the grocery stores, what do I need to do to get to work, you should do the same kind of thing. Cloud environment is not just a data center at the end of a wire. It is a whole new environment to implement applications in, and you should do that.
Gotcha. All right. I want to ask you the next question. Should I have a DevOps staff in my development group or a centralized DevOps group?
Yeah, the best organizations I've seen really put to have a center of excellence, a group that really develops the pipelines and then has personnel within the groups that really are assigned to um, use that developed pipeline within their application. So they are tuning that centrally developed DevOps pipeline in their application.
Gotcha. Nice. You know what? We've got time for another question. Let me pull one from the audience. Here's a good one. How can I ensure I run my applications cost effectively?
Well, there's two aspects to it. One is design and operate correctly. And then the second is really use the kinds of things that Steph outlined, which is, you know, that's the cliche is what you measure, you manage. And so measure your cost and then track it against the kinds of things that you do. And so, you know, as you migrate to these cloud native practices, you implement the architectures, see what effect that has on your application operating costs. And you do it pretty granularly at the application level and see if those costs are coming down as you're moving to these kinds of techniques I've been talking about.
Nice. I like it. Thank you, Bernard. All right. You know what, folks? Now it's time to bring Giddy back on. We're going to do some magic and then a raffle. Don't forget, we have the Keurig happening.